Are you new to the world of entrepreneurship? You want to learn more about sales? Are you looking for clarity? Are you stuck and need to get unstuck? This podcast is an ongoing conversation between Greg and Don, two entrepreneurs with over 70 years experience. They cover topics related to building a sales career, from rookie to rainmaker, becoming a top real estate agent, or becoming an entrepreneur and building your own business. We're also sharing stories about our past experiences and offering some tips to overcome your challenges in growing your business. So stick around. We're just getting started. Hello, and welcome to today's installment of our podcast. Our topic today will be sales anxiety and its root causes, along with some coping strategies that we think you'll find helpful. Sales anxiety is a common challenge that many salespeople face. Whether they're new to the industry or have been in it for years, it can manifest itself in different ways. These include fear of rejection, nervousness before a pitch, or difficulty closing deals. The purpose of this episode is to help you understand the root causes of sales anxiety and how it affects your performance. We'll be exploring the different factors that contribute to sales anxiety, such as a negative self-talk, unrealistic expectations, or lack of confidence. We'll also provide practical coping strategies to help you manage your anxiety and improve your sales results. So if you're struggling with sales anxiety, or if you know someone who is, be sure to stick around for this episode. You'll come away with a better understanding of this common challenge and some valuable tools to help you overcome it. So here we are. We're back with Greg and Don, and I'm Don Gertz, and this is my friend Greg DeMarco, and we're talking about sales anxiety. And why don't you give us your definition of sales anxiety, Greg? You've been in the sales business for 30 plus odd years and sold many different things. But why don't you give us your definition of what you think sales anxiety would be?
Well, yeah, thanks, Don. Listen, sales anxiety is a real thing for sure. And the best way to define it is basically being nervous, hesitating, not wanting to do a call or be there in person with somebody. It's that whole feeling of rejection, and these kinds of feelings seem to trump everything else. In other words, to the point where you can't do a presentation or you're very bad at it because your thoughts are going towards failing instead of trying to help somebody. That's my definition of sales anxiety.
Yeah, when
Which is,
somebody throws you an objection it takes you
yeah,
totally off your presentation.
yeah, it's an awful feeling. Nothing's worse than feeling like you're stuck and there's nowhere. It's stuck in some place that you don't belong, right?
Yeah.
And that's the problem with sales anxiety is it usually seizes people up, and you can't perform the way you should, right?
Yeah, I think sales anxiety can get to the point where you don't want to even engage with your clients. I
No.
know, sometimes if you were having some sales anxiety, and if you have the type of sales job where you're on the floor, where
Yeah.
one up and one down, kind of thing. And if you're suffering from sales anxiety, not feeling good about your presentation or not what you're doing, you're going to miss out on actually engaging the clients. And isn't that what we do? What we're supposed to do as salespeople is to engage with the people.
Well, that's what they tell us.
Yeah.
I think it's all about people. In fact, I think it's about helping others.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what happens. And it's, listen, I remember going through it quite a bit. And I remember an instance where I had to drive across the city and see a client or a buyer to make into a client. And for some reason, I just seized. It was the worst presentation. I was going through all this. Oh, she's not going to like what I have to say. She doesn't need the information, even though she contacted me. It's not like I was doing a cold call. She'd contacted me looking for the type of service, but I couldn't pull it together, and it's because I got into a loop. I froze basically, and thinking about how nervous I was and that I was going to fail at it, and I was going to get rejected, and it really threw me for a loop.
there's
You know.
that there's that conversation we can have in our mind, and we can be our worst critic, right? So
Oh,
you know
geez, yeah.
we can be the source of that sales anxiety ourselves. It might, there might be, something external, but I think quite often our sales anxiety is a result of that sales conversation that conversation that we're having with ourselves. And we got to learn how to control that self-saboteur, they call them. Some people
Yeah.
call them the self-saboteur. Maybe we should
Well,
talk about the self-saboteur in one of our upcoming
I think
episodes.
yes,
And
self-sabotage is a real thing. And geez, I remember so many times when I was training salespeople in a different life, and I've watched people talk themselves into the sale and then immediately talk themselves out of it
yeah, yeah,
because they just
yeah,
don't know when to stop. But that's what happens, and
yeah,
they self-sabotage themselves, and I think that's what happens. They sometimes the training. I believe in training. I believe in good training and education, really more so than training. But I think when it gets overwhelming, that's when people just, if a customer or if a buyer asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, they think that they have to answer it,
yeah. I mean,
and they
sometimes,
don't.
yeah, yeah, and absolutely, that's true. I believe that as well.
Yeah.
So, um, what would you say would be some of the root causes of sales anxiety? When like we all have it, or to some degree or another.
Yeah.
I think every salesperson does have some anxiety, and they've either learned how to control it, or it's still affecting them. So what would you think of would be some of the root causes of the sales anxiety?
Well, I think one of the main causes of it is well, one is they get overwhelmed. We already talked about that. Where I think that sometimes they just, instead of concentrating on how to help the person across from you, they think more about what problems that could arise. You have to think about how you can help somebody before you think about the problems that are existing. Ask them the questions, but the most important one I think is being unprepared, truthfully. And you know you really should prepare yourself and understand the product that you're selling. Not just that, some of the best training programs I've gone through, and where I teach in role play situations, is basically that, is understanding what common objections there are, knowing how to answer those common objections, and then being able to basically communicate that, but being focused on how to help the client, not how to fix a problem. You have to be focused on how you can help them, and I
So we
think that's
have
most important.
not being prepared enough. Like
Yeah.
that would include knowing your product, knowing what it is that you're actually selling, or what you're presenting.
Yep.
So and then after that,
Well, I think overwhelm is a big problem. Listen, you know what? It can be daunting when you're starting out in sales and you have to talk to somebody. It's pretty scary for a lot of people. But so they get overwhelmed and they start negative self talking themselves, right? They start
yeah,
saying, "Oh, I can't do this. It's too difficult. I'm afraid to talk to these people. I don't know what to say." Then they really, this is where you talk about your self sabotage. Then they get into that, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't even know why I agreed to do this. They get into this real scary
yeah,
situation that they create.
yeah.
They're creating it themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, no, no, absolutely. I know with new realtors, that's one of the big things for them. I'd go be on a coaching call with them and ask them and say, what can I help you with? Say, well, I don't know. I don't know what to say,
Yeah.
and that was basically, what a lot of their fear was, as they don't know what to say. They don't look at themselves as having the experience that they need to actually fulfill the client's needs, when actually it's not as complicated as that. It's just talking to them and saying, okay, finding out what the client needs, because unless you take the time to find out what the client needs, you could make your presentation, but you might be presenting on totally the wrong thing. Now, making your presentation isn't, I don't think, the same thing as knowing your product. If you know your product and then
Yeah.
talk about and then make have a conversation with your client, and find out what their actual need is and how you can solve, then you know your product and you know which part of your product is going to solve their need. So I think that's understanding and being uh, um, prepared is a big factor.
Well, I think that, listen, it's a good conversation because for a lot of reasons. I think people get psyched out. They psych themselves out. And here's what I always tell my clients. We're just having a conversation, people. We're just having a conversation with somebody. You don't have to, because you see, in some of the training, they train on, you have to say it this way and you can't say this and you have to say this. It's not even about that. What it is, sales is always about asking the right questions. The questions you ask are going to reveal from your buyer what it is that bothers them. And you have to be able to ask the right questions in order to get that information. Listen, if you know your product, you know what the benefits are, more so than the features, I think. But if you know your product and the solution it creates, then find out what's bothering the buyer, find out about them, what they need, and fill in the blanks. It's just a conversation, that's all it really is in the end. And I think sometimes people get tied up with, oh, I have to say it exactly like this, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. No, it's really just about understanding and asking the right questions.
You mentioned the presentation and knowing what to say, and you have back in your history long time ago. I know you used to sell vacuum cleaners, and I used to
Yes, I
sell
do.
vacuum cleaners as well. And we used to have we used to sit there
Hey,
and
hey, Don, sorry, did they give you a little bag of dirt you had to pour on the
oh
floor?
yeah, you dump it on the floor. Yeah, actually, what we did we didn't do that so much as we would vacuum up their dirt and then we'd put their dirt back. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
was
Of
kind of
course, of
how
course.
it worked because you had this little screen that would
Yeah,
do it. So, but the thing was is that you had this presentation that you had to memorize,
yeah,
and then you would have this canned approach, and when somebody didn't like what you did or didn't wasn't interested in what you were selling, they would give you an objection. But if it wasn't in the script, it was just okay, like they didn't go on script, right? They weren't
yeah,
on the script. So how do
yeah.
how do I do this? But as you gain experience and as you actually spend time talking to them about the problem that they have and how you can solve their problem. See, but that was the different type of selling. Vacuum cleaner sales is you go in there and try to show them that they have a problem and
That's
then that you
right.
and then that you can do it. Where the type of selling that I prefer to do and you prefer to do is discovering what the problem that they have, and then we provide the solution.
Correct.
To yeah, because the one is all about pressure, and the other is all about helping the client. And I think
Well, that's
we
right.
need
That's
we
right.
need to we need to be all about helping the client. So understanding what it is that you're actually selling, because if you're selling something in direct sales like vacuum cleaners or that, um, uh, that's a different type of selling, and you need to have your presentation down, just bang 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 bang, but understanding, dealing offering a client value, saying, okay, what's your problem, how are we going to solve your problem, and recognizing that what you do is help solve their problem. Then understanding your product and solution is going to get you through that.
Yeah.
Does that make
No, it
sense?
makes it makes perfect sense. It's the same like you talk about real estate sales or when I sold yachts or boats. It's very similar, and what you're doing is they're there for a reason. They're there to either buy a house or buy a yacht or a boat or whatever it is they're trying to buy. And it's different than cold calling or sales like you just mentioned. But what you're doing is you're establishing a line of communication with them. You're trying to build a connection. You're trying to get rapport. There's some kind of commonality there. Okay. And then you're finding out what their likes and dislikes are by asking the right questions. And it's like I always said to the people I was training, a great way, this is a good tip because if you get stumped, if you get fumbled up on something, just ask a question. That's the best way out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
asking another question. Then that way you get back on track and you know something more than you did a second ago about that person, and you go on to try and solve the problem. But that's what it's really about.
Yeah, couple of questions you could ask and say, well, why did you say that? Or
Yeah,
why do you feel that way about it? And
yeah.
then another question you could say, if somebody says this is what I want, and then a question you could ask is, how will you feel? Once you achieve that objective.
Well,
So I think that can actually be one of the solutions to, or one of the sources of sales anxiety, is the salesperson doesn't think they're trained enough. They don't they haven't had enough training to go through, and get the results that they want.
well, that's a good point you just made there. Really, sales is about pulling on the heartstrings. It's about emotions. What's that saying they always say? You buy on emotion, but or you buy. What is that saying? You buy
you
with logic,
you buy emotionally, and you try to justify it with
justify
logic.
with logic. So you have to touch on the emotional side of it. If you don't, you're not getting anywhere. That's the plain and simple of it. And you have to be able to navigate that. And it helps when you have a little bit of empathy and care about actually wanting to do the right thing for the buyer. And that's where you start to build real rapport and connection. And most importantly, that's where you start to build the trust.
Yep.
But you have to ask these questions. And another question I've often, what I usually say after I hear something is I'll say, okay, so if I understand you correctly, that sounds like it's very important to you that this, and then I sort of repeat back what they just said to me. Am I understanding you right? Yes, that's exactly what I mean. But it also gives some clarification as to make sure that you do understand what they're saying, and that shows them that you care.
So basically, asking questions and knowing and asking the right questions is one way that they could actually cope with it would be a coping strategy for their sales anxiety, knowing
Yeah,
knowing that knowing that they, as long as they continue on in the process, that it's going to eventually lead to something else. So that
yeah,
would
and
be a coping strategies.
yeah, and you have to be able to you as a salesperson shouldn't be talking as much as listening, right? So
Yeah.
that's the most important thing because if you're asking questions, then you're finding out about them. And more importantly, you're building that trust and rapport. Like, I mean, honestly, Don, when I do sales calls now, my goal really isn't even on the first call to um, sell them something. Obviously, if the tempo of the conversation goes that way, I'm going to take it that way. But really, what I'm trying to do in the first call or the first conversation is to get to know them, and find out what is really what it is they really want, what they desire. Then once you know that, the conversation starts to go down the right path, right? Get to know them. That's what you
Yeah.
need to do.
So the more conversations you have with clients or people,
Hmm.
the more you're going to be prepared, because you're going to have more experience. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, yeah. You get
So
you want a conversation. That's all you're
so
doing. That's how you have to think of it.
so we should practice our conversations.
Yeah,
Like, you can
absolutely.
practice with your dog, practice with your cat, practice
Yeah,
with your
you can.
spouse, practice with your kids.
Yeah,
Like, the dog and the cat might not have come up with the right kind of objections, but I know that one of the things that you can do, as also, is do a role play with other salespeople in
absolutely.
your business. So if you're role playing with somebody, if you and I were role playing, I would maybe say, okay, I had this objection, or had this circumstance come up, and then we can role play that circumstance. And you have a different perspective of that than I do. So through that role play, we're able to help each other our sales anxiety.
Well, that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought it up because one of the most pivotal things that I learned that was the best thing for my sales. My sales started to jump and climb when I started to learn this. We used to train role playing. We used to do role playing. And that was a pivotal moment for me in understanding, first of all, for building confidence. So when we would role play with the other guys on our team, it would help build the confidence so that when we went into, for example, if I was working a boat show, when I was selling boats, we would role play that scenario, because it's different selling at a boat show than it is selling on the dock, at a marina, because you have more time on the docks, but you don't have as much time in a trade show environment. So you have to be able to build rapport, get a connection, build the trust, and have them sitting down to buy a boat within 30 minutes. Sometimes it was a little less, but sometimes it was a little more. But you didn't have the time. Whereas on the dock, you could get to know people, you could show them the boats, you could go in the water test, the whole 9 yards. But the point I'm trying to make is, you have to be able to perform that way in order to be most effective. So
Did you have favorite lines when you were at the boat show that you would use, like to introduce yourself? Did you have? I
yeah.
guess somebody might call it a pickup line, but
Well, it is. One of the stupid ones that I used to have was, so did you guys find the cheese at the end of the maze? Then they'd look at you and I said, well, there's a lot of boats out there and a lot of aisles. Did you find the cheese? And then they'd
yeah,
start laughing, right? Which was really corny, to be
yeah,
honest with you. But yeah, you come up with a few that here and there that you would try and lure people to you. But really, in the end, for me, I was really good at it. Actually, the trade shows, I did 25 to 30% of my revenue at the Toronto International Boat Show in January, and that was because I was able to figure out how to build rapport quickly and move in that direction.
yeah. That's I think one of the key things to it. That type of an environment, you need to be able to build rapport quickly. My wife is very good at that. A friend of ours is a chiropractor, and he had a trade show going, and he asked Sonia to come man the booth with them. And the reason he wanted her was because he knows how friendly she is and how people just naturally want to talk to
A,
her. So
a greeter, that's what we
she
used to call
a-
them,
absolutely,
greeters.
she would get people to come into the booth. I mean, I don't know how many trade shows I've been to, and you walk around and people are sitting there. They're either on their phone, or some people are knitting or doing whatever, but they're there to do business. And they're just
That's
sitting there,
right.
not. And those are people, I think, that have sales anxiety, that have gone, and the anxiety is so great. They how am I going to meet these people?
Well,
And
you're bang on, man. I can't believe you just said all that. It brings me back because we had a golden rule. You think about how much money is spent. The marina that I worked for spent almost $1 million for that show. Just the cost of it being there. Team. And we weren't allowed to do that kind of stuff in there. We had to be engaging. You couldn't eat in the booth and all that kind of stuff. But you're right. It's how you present yourself. There's a lot of little things that stack up to getting to do the right thing, right?
Yeah, I know Sonia's always been very, very good at doing that type of thing. Like I'd go to real estate conferences, and she'd go into the room, and there'd be a big room, and she'd meet everybody, and then I would maybe
Nice.
meet one or two people, and then all of a sudden she'd bring these people over, and they'd say, "Oh, you're Sonia's husband." I mean, it was my show. I mean, I was the
Yeah,
real,
you
but
were it was
I
your
was
show and she was yeah, that's too funny.
I'm Sonia's husband. Anyway, that was fine. She's always been a better
But
networker
that,
than
hey,
I am.
listen though, listen, Don, that's a good example of a good tip for people who are introverts.
Yeah,
You go to a networking event or a show. If you're an introvert, take someone who's an extrovert
yeah,
because
absolutely.
they'll meet everybody and they'll introduce you to them.
Yeah, yeah. I know it's so we have that's that's one of the things you can do. That would be a coping strategy as well. But anxiety can really hit people in significant ways. It could be debilitating in other anxiety and mental illness, type of issues. And we're not really talking about that kind of anxiety. We're talking about sales anxiety. But some of the things that will help you in your with your sales anxiety will help you with if you suffer from anxiety in general. Like one of the things I think we need to do is remember that we have to look after ourselves. We have to have a lot of self care. make sure that you're not overtired, because when you're overtired, you're not going to be as sharp. You're going to let that self-talk, it'll come back at you and hit you easier. But when you also want to find out what helps you reduce stress. Like when you're stressed, Greg, what would you do to relieve your stress?
So, I mean, for me to relieve stress, what I normally do is physical activity of some sort. That's how I get my stress release, by working out. But I mean, listen, there's a lot of things that people can do. They can get help from a mentor, a coach. Mindset is extremely important. Uh, Being able to be in the right frame of mind, working on your self coping mechanisms, triggers and stuff like, or the things that, knowing what the triggers are that cause the problems, is a big one. But there's lots of things that you can do to sort of relieve the stress. One of them, again, is being prepared.
Being prepared,
And
yep.
sleep is a big one. Mindset, understanding what it is that this self negative talk is the worst thing of all. This is what causes your sales, or this is what causes your problems, is just the fact that you have these limiting beliefs. And you have to be able to role play, is one big way of getting through and building confidence in your abilities.
Yeah,
That is a huge one.
yeah, I agree. So, sales anxiety, everybody suffers from it to some degree or another. We all have different, we need to recognize that it's not just the new people that have it, but even experienced people go through and probably different stages of our career. But it's all about learning and growing more and becoming a better salesperson. So we should be, some of the ways that we can overcome it is by making sure that we have our presentation, uh, we know our presentation, we know our stuff, that we have good product knowledge. We can role play different situations. We can get a mentor to help us through different things that we can bounce things off of as well. And then to make sure that we practice self care. Would you say that that would be a good uh, way for somebody that is suffering from sales anxiety to take the first step and say, okay, here, figure out what it is that's causing your anxiety, and then what's the best solution for it?
Yeah, so I mean, there's other ways. There's folk, like, you just listen. When it comes down to it, sales isn't as difficult as most people think. If you want to cope with anxiety, it's not about you. It's about the customer. It's about the buyer. It's the person in front of you. That's one thing that you have to start to shift your focus on. Okay, stop thinking about the things that could go wrong, and start thinking about the things that you can do to help that buyer. The second thing is, finding that mentor or support system. Listen, one of the things when I started a new job, or when I was in the boat sales or whatever sales, I gravitated to the people who were doing the best in the sales department. And I would ask them questions, find out what the objections were, getting help from a support system. Um, Keeping things in perspective and understanding what the different things are. But most importantly, you just need to focus on the customer, and you need to focus on making sure that you're in a positive frame of mind. Let's face it, if you're not enthusiastic about what you do, then why the hell is somebody going to buy from you? If you're not enthusiastic about the product you're selling, why should somebody else be enthusiastic about it, right?
I think that's one of the big things for new salespeople. They're concerned about, they have that sales anxiety, and they say, why would someone want to do business with me? I have no experience. But I think the enthusiasm of being brand new gives them that gives them that reason, because answering the questions is just, having a sales conversation with them, find out the questions they have. If you don't know the answer, it's not like it's not like you're going to sell the house that day. It's a process, step by step process. So understand your process, and then you can help go. Well, we're running out of time here, Greg, but I just want to thank you for joining me in this conversation about sales anxiety. It is something that is significant for a lot of people. and for salespeople, and it can be debilitating. It could keep you from being successful in your chosen field, and but it is something that can be overcome, and we just want to be able to help you. So I'd like to encourage you, if you would like to have a further conversation, Greg is available. You can get him. His link will be in the comments below, or myself. You can contact me as well if you would like to have more conversation about this. So Greg, thanks again for joining this
Thanks,
conversation,
Don.
and we'll see you next time.
See ya. Bye for now.